Hello, my name is Teresa Chan. I'd like to welcome you to my mini talk and workshop on going from brain to page. So, I'd like to start things off with an activity. And though I'm not there in the room with you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you at some point to pause. And at that time, I'd like you to stop for about 2 or 3 minutes to quickly jot down exactly what I told you to jot down, and then you can bring it back to what I'm saying, and the idea would be to interact with me a little bit. All right? So the first thing I'd like you to do is think back to your last talk that you had to give and write down your process for planning the talk. All right, so pause now. All right, so welcome back. And if you cheated and didn't pause, well, it's your loss. But I'd like you to look at what you have in front of you. Now, how many of you wrote sentences or paragraphs or maybe a list? Some of you might have used arrows to kind of show your process. And rarely, some of you may have used pure graphics, such as cartooning, to try to figure out and convey how you did the step by step. I'll be honest with you, in medicine, probably fewer people will do the cartooning and more people will do kind of lists and bullet points. So, as you can see from the beginning, the way that you think probably impacts on how you're going to end up with different points of view. So whether that's on a PowerPoint slide, which is usually the way that we express our points of view, or sometimes even in a handout that you might give. Right. So far, I haven't really walked the walk, right? So I'm giving this talk, and I have a bland page like this as my cover page, right? So to walk the walk, this is the actual cover page that I'd like to give to you. And that's me next to one of the brain models at one of the museums in New York City. And I'd like to talk about going from brain to page. All right, so one of the key things that we'll learn is that there will be take-home points that I'd like to emphasize, and this is one of them. So the concept begets the design. If you think in words, then you'll get words in the end. And if you think in shapes, then you'll get shapes. But if you think in both, then probably that'll enhance everyone's understanding and you'll be a bit of a star. So I think that the happy medium is to not think purely graphically or purely literally, but in order to enhance people's learning, you want to try to use a combination of both. So what talk would be complete without objectives? And really what I want to go through is that after this mini workshop that you'd be able to demonstrate graphical conceptualization, so being able to jot something down in the back of the napkin, um, translation of a concept into a presentable form, appreciate the limitations of commonly used software, including, Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Max Pages and Keynote, and evaluate the merits of various software platforms and choose the appropriate system to build your tools. So, computer programs. So the graphic design standard right now largely is programs like InDesign. So if you go to most people that do graphic design or layout, this is probably what's on their desktop, whether it's in Mac or PC form. This is going to be your classic program. So the problems with InDesign is that it's very cumbersome, it's hard to learn, and the learning curve is almost infinite. Um, if you were lucky enough to learn, and often people learn in high school and such, then you can buy this suite. It's also quite expensive. The educational package software would probably run you about $350 for the Creative Suite, so $350 that is. Um, and probably if you were to buy it professionally without an educational discount, it might run closer to 600 to 1,000 words. And that's usually both InDesign and Photoshop and all the other things that come with that package. So cost prohibitive, complicated, and I don't know if it's something that most of us will need to use. So let's talk about things that are the polar opposite end, which is very common. So Microsoft Word, this is kind of the standard thing that everyone has on the computer. And what you see here is that, you usually have your bland, like I'm typing notes kind of template. And it usually starts with a blank page, but as you can see in the background, you got Word Document Gallery, and that can be quite useful in terms of helping inspire you, and you can improv off of what they give you, and input new pictures and whatnot, and kind of find a layout that pleases you, let's say. All right, so next is good old Microsoft PowerPoint, which for the same reasons is something that we're standardly very comfortable with, and I think that helps, especially when you're just getting started. You want to use programs you know and you love and you always kind of appreciate. So a big part of it will be to kind of use PowerPoint more in a palette format, and note that, and adding shapes and layering things over top of each other. You can free PowerPoint out from being just your straightforward slide producer to actually being a palette from which you can design handouts and lay out things, and it has embedded shapes, so it's really nice. And so if you turn the page to portrait in the page setup, then you have a blank slate for creating like a beautiful handout, for instance. Um, Pages also has a lot of default setting templates, and I think that this is really nice because it can inspire you. If you're someone that's just getting started, you can improvise off of what people have already designed, and they hire obviously very good graphic designers to make these templates and make them available to you. And other places to find inspiration are actually the internet, for one, although again there's good and bad out there on the internet, and also to consider looking at magazines and flipping through things. So if you've got a Wired magazine or a Harvard Business Review magazine, both of those often use a lot of the graphics and tables and figures to enhance the learning message that they're trying to get across. So those are good magazines to kind of take a look at and see how form can and good design can influence your ability to digest complicated concepts. So, activity number 2 is name that program. And so I'm just going to scroll through some things and give you a chance to yell out what you think was the program that I used to make that document. All right, so obviously this is PowerPoint, yeah. So this is your template that often gets churned out if you're doing presenter slides in a format that allows people to note take. Yeah, this is Microsoft Word. I think you've seen this page before. But I think a big part of it is to emphasize that, yeah, Microsoft Word has its limitations, and yeah, it kind of forces you to think in this way, but, we'll ramp up to more difficult ones, and we'll see. Yeah, so some people think this might be made in Pages, but really it's just that Microsoft Word. Again, it's using color and form in a different way, using white justified to kind of change the way that you typically see Word documents, also using a single text box in order to enhance the words and layout. So that's a big part of it as well. So entering a little bit of color, a little bit of shading, and boom, you have a little bit of a different layout. All right, so I use Pages to create this. So I wanted to do that because I just like the way that Pages allows for a little bit more free movement of boxes, whereas Microsoft Word sometimes anchors things in a funny thing and snaps guidelines in funny ways, and there's a lot of kind of back-end stuff that is a little glitchy at times. So I like Pages for this purpose. Like, I'm able to create a text box, it'll stay where I want it to, and I can put words in it. And I can also add arrows and dotted lines and things like that. So because not all of us will have Pages, one of the things you can do is actually use PowerPoint for the same reason. So this was generated in PowerPoint. And what's nice about it is that you can create tables, you can float them around, you can create boxes, you can add words to the boxes, you can add arrows, and all these things are kind of free floating and can be moved around. So a lot of people ask if this is made in InDesign, but if you kind of pay attention to the previous template pages, you might catch a glimpse of a template in Microsoft Word that's very similar. So this is actually made in Microsoft Word, and I improvised off of a template they had and added my own pictures and added in my custom-made words, and then added kind of slight spruces of color here and there that weren't in the original template, but it's totally doable to go off of their template and then just tweak it a little bit. So it's a conceptual evolution that happens, right? You go from typing up your rough draft to kind of organizing them in a way that makes sense to you and makes sense to the information. You can stop there, or you can take it to the next phase, which is then unify the colors, get rid of extraneous things, highlight things, or underline things with color, and kind of enhance things that way. All right, so take home point number 2 is that computers are just the means by which you execute your ideas. And it's not the size of your hard drive or your RAM that counts, it's how you use it. So again, if you think graphically and you have a vision in your head for what something will lay out to be, then you're more likely to make that happen. And then you can use your toolbox of different programs to make it happen. So if you want something to kind of have boxes floating around, then if you can't have access to pages, because not everybody does, then maybe think about PowerPoint, because most people do have access to that. All right. So activity number 3 is another playing session. So what I'd like you to do is think about a story. So pick your favorite fairy tale and write down, what are the main plot line points. Okay, you can pause here. All right, welcome back. Okay, so you've got your plotline points. You can kind of describe now to a partner maybe sitting next to you, or just think about if you're watching this on your own. Think about this on your own. How would I now tell that with pure pictures? So what kind of pictures would I look for? Would I look for photos? Would I cartoon it out? How would I do that? And so that's trying to get you away from using sentences. All right. So now that you've had some moments to think about that, now combine your words and graphics. Okay, pause here. Okay, and if you're resuming this after a couple of minutes, you might not have finished the task, but at least you get a sense of how words or graphics can give you success. And really, in many ways, it's kind of like the intermediate step is actually often what we see in cartoons, what we see in comic books. The idea of both using graphics in a way that conveys meaning, but then layering on words to explain that meaning. Um, and I think that this comes from a place of using the graphics as kind of your main message um, conveying medium, and then on the top of that, layering on words that clarify your meaning. So take home point number 3 is think about your message, write it down, and then try to reconceptualize it into different forms. So if you're a linear thinker, then try to think spatially. Think about how instead of bullet points in a row, that you might actually use a chart to kind of say the same thing. Um, or if you're a spatial thinker, like you already kind of sprawl everything all over the page, then think about how that might look temporally. So how would you phase each of those things in? And so when you throw up a PowerPoint, for instance, what would the first box you want to fill in a chart? And then sequentially, what's the next thing and the next thing? And so you can think temporally. And then another thing would be thinking words first and then add in graphics. Or if you're a graphical thinker, thinking graphics first and then what are the words that would convey the same thing? So in playing with this kind of back and forth translation, you might find different nuances that you didn't think were there. All right. So this is another thing that I'd like you to think about. Which of these 2 pages would you want your audience to be reading during your lecture? Yeah, most people are going to pick the one on the left, let's be honest, right? Because it's what we're used to, it's what we see. And it's probably easier for someone to read your slides and take the notes down. That's true. But let me challenge you in saying, should they even read during the lecture? And by this point, if you're already reading the text underneath, then probably I'm making my point, which is that you should try to get your audience to focus on you. All right, so to do so, you want to design for this purpose. So you can design for the purpose, or you can use purposeful design, same thing. And so take home point number 4 is to use purposeful design. To think about your message in the form that would match it. And then just like objectives and instructional design, try to match that form and message so that it's congruent. So, for instance, if you wanted people to take a handout home, then which one would you think they are more likely to read later? So if you want someone to read something during the lecture, then you give them a slide set and you give them room to write and follow along with you. If you have a handout that you want them to read later and redigest later, then that's a different stance. And so if that's the reason why you want to give them a handout is to read later, then you might actually produce a handout that is hard for them to read during the lecture, but that when they go back to it will kind of reframe and rephrase the things that you said in a different way and present it so that they might grasp it another way. So this is another activity they're coming on. So this is saying that's very famous in Canada where I'm from, which is Marshall McLuhan was a communication specialist and thought a lot about this. And he said the famous phrase, the medium is the message. And so the idea of the medium conveying just as much, or if not more, information about the society at large than the actual message that's contained about it. So I'm going to use this phrase because I like it to kind of play a little bit. And in doing so, I think that my medium is actually going to kind of give you a message. So this is another way to play with it. I'm using all the word caps. I'm doing right justified just to change the paradigm. I'm using balanced space, and it's just probably a little bit more graphically appealing than the default setting that you saw before, right? So this versus this, one's a little bit more stylized. All right, so let's kick it up a notch, as they would say, or as Emerald would say. And here's another one, right? So I've got a clear division between the two. I'm still using my white space. I'm still using right justified, but I'm doing it a slightly different way. All right, so this I'm using emphasis of color, and I'm trying to emphasize the words media, message, and McLuhan, and you might walk away kind of with a visual imprint of those three things. This I'm using size to emphasize the medium is the message is the same that I want you to walk away with. This is an accent of both color and size. This I'm using the iconic kind of quotation marks to emphasize quotes, and then everything else is playing with the words. And again, I'm using size for emphasis here. So take home point number 5 is that you need to play and you need to practice. And if it ain't fun, you're not going to do it repeatedly. And if you don't do it often, then you're going to lose it. Or if you're just starting out in this manner and thinking in this way, you might never gain it in the first place. So take home point number 4 is really extended by Yoda's famous phrase, do or do not, there is no try. And probably said by George Lucas, but you got to go out there and do it over and over again. And, you may try to convey something, but in the end you will convey something. Whether or not you did optimally, different story, but again, you'll put it out there and you'll see what the reaction is and then go from there. So now it's your turn. Try to apply these principles the next time you're doing a talk. Try to use graphical communication to convey meaning in the same way that you would use words. Try to think about how you could use graphics, or at least a modification of thinking spatially, and all those different accents that I'm trying to give you, and play with it and try to see what you can do. Okay, so thank you very much for tuning in. What I'll do is I'm going to leave up a couple of references that I thought were very useful in kind of framing the way that I think about these things. One of the sites that I'll turn you to is actually TED.com. And right here, you'll find, search on TED.com for David McCandless. And he talks a lot about, he's a graphic designer for the New York Times, and he talks about how graphics can be a way to convey meaning and useful information. Another book that I found was very useful is this PowerPoint presentation Zen. And it's not just for PowerPoint, obviously, it's for any kind of presentation you have to do. And that one's a very graphically oriented position on how to do presentations. It probably is a little bit extreme, but I think that for people that typically think in words is a great way to challenge yourself and think about it. Another way of looking at it is the back of the napkin, and that's a book by Dan Rome. He also has another book called Blah Blah Blah. As you can see, he doesn't mince words, and really he's trying to get you to think graphically in the way of planning your presentations and planning what it is you want to convey. and he's again emphasizes a lot. His background is more in graphics than it is in um, narrative. So I think that that's really useful and challenges the way that you kind of think about how you create your narrative. All right, so thank you very much for your time, and good luck with all your future design. Bye.